What's up, everybody? So Viltrox was nice enough to send me the 135 lab, and I've already done the test, the initial test. You can check that out somewhere up here if you want to see that first. Today what I want to do is I actually want to compare I want to compare the lab to the Plena. And what we're going to do, I'm going to take only one picture with each lens. I'm not going to tell Allie which one is which, and I'm just going to let her pick which one she likes, and then we'll address that in the post-shoot in Lightroom. But what I'm going to look for today is sharpness, contrast, color, see if there's any differences. Bokeh, obviously there's going to be differences. The Plena is designed specifically to have perfectly circular bokeh. The lab, not so much. Is it like motorcycle day? Like what the I should mention also, I'm going to do both of these in single point autofocus. Actually, you know what? What I'll do is I'll do one image in single point autofocus, and then I'll do one in eye tracking, even though I know that the lab does respond better in just single point autofocus. And that's not a fault of the lens necessarily. Keep in mind, most third-party lenses are never going to communicate as well as a native lens. And then we'll do one with eye tracking. Okay, now I want to try to get some bokeh balls right there. So basically these are in twos, and so lens 1 will always be 1, and then the next one is lens 2.
Okay.
And then the third one, lens 1, fourth one, lens 2, fifth one, lens 1, sixth one, lens 2.
Okay.
So as you compare, just kind of go left and right and see which one you like.
Heard.
Okay. So now I'm going to have Allie jump back and forth between the images. We have a total of 6, so that's 3 shots with each lens, and see if she can decide which one she likes better, not knowing which one is more expensive. Might clip that on your collar.
Thank you. Let's not drop the camera while we do this, shall we?
Yeah, that's not.
It's coming out of my paycheck if I do that.
You might have to, since it's vertical, you might have to push that way too.
Oh, perfect. Damn, these are close.
Your silence is exactly what I was feeling looking through the viewfinder, like it's...
The only thing that I can see, and this might just...
You can zoom in a little bit too with the plus and minus button. You can zoom in and zoom out to get a closer look.
Okay, that might be what I need to do. Okay, the only thing I can say about the second one is that there's a slight softness that comes with the lens. It's not super noticeable, but like, it's not even necessarily softness, but a tint of warm. Less than the first lens. The first lens has a slightly more cool tone, and the only reason I can see that is like from the reds that pop out from my face. If you look here, this is like a little bit more, you can see like not as saturated skin, but once we come to this side, this comes out to be a little bit more yellow, a little bit more red. This kind of cools down the red tones just a tad. Like, you're still gonna have to go in and fix that, like, post photo shoot. This brings in more reds. It's slightly more saturated. But that's really the only difference I'm seeing. Even in these photos, and like the shadows, I'm not seeing a huge difference. They're practically the same lens. Like, it's picking up my pores, it's picking up, this one just has slightly more red, a slight bit more red tinge to it.
So at least on the back of the camera, do you see any like noticeable differences in sharpness?
No, like contrast is all the same, sharpness is all the same. It looks like the same lens.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I made a comment while I was shooting, and I realized I shouldn't have because I wanted Allie to be blind doing this. But I was thinking to myself, like, Nikon might be in trouble with this because they're so similar.
And this might just be because, again, it's bringing in more warm tones. I'm seeing my baby hairs more clearly on the second photograph. I don't really have a preference. I would say that, like, personally, with my skin tone, I like it when my reds don't come out as much, so I would probably, again, very slightly prefer the first photos, but they're not really different at all. Like, if one's more expensive, I would go with the inexpensive lens, because if that is the one that's making it like redder tones, you can fix that in Photoshop really easy.
So I kind of agree what Allie just said. To put it into like really short words, the difference between the two lenses is going to come down to the photographer. If you're not editing your photos, there may be a preference, but we may find with a slight adjustment of reds, there really is no difference. And so from the client's perspective, it's too similar to even like matter. Ellie just had a pretty good idea for an extra test shot that I'm going to entertain. Explain.
So there's two very distinct colors. We have a very blue door across the street, and then we did this in another shoot, but there's like this red door as well on the opposite side of the street. And if the difference is only color, then that's going to be how we decide if one lens is worth more, because if you prefer blues in your photography, then that, like, the one that does blues better is going to be which one to pick. If you like reds more, then you're going to go with the lens that brings in more saturation. Again, this is all dependent on if you don't want to edit your photos at all. If you're wanting to edit your photos, this makes no difference. But if you're just looking for a lens that you can point, shoot, and send, that's what's going to make the call for you. But I think that's the only way we'll figure out if there's really a big difference at all.
You know what's interesting too is I found in my my general testing, I always do a color saturation test, and I found that what I found across basically all Nikon lenses is that their reds are generally really well saturated, or at least dead accurate. What I found with the Viltrox 135 Lab kind of shift a little more towards just barely, like a little bit of like an orange, and so they're not exactly accurate to red. I find it kind of interesting that you found that camera lens 1, which I'll tell you now is the Nikon.
Okay.
You liked kind of how your skin looked on that one more, and I'm wondering if you're just like kind of subtly picking up on the fact that the reds are kind of more like an orange on your skin, and so for your skin in particular, it may be you may shift a little more towards orange than red naturally. And so that's why you're like, I'm not really feeling my skin tone as much in the Viltrox, and so that's just an interesting observation. But we're gonna take a picture of those real quick, and then I will see you guys in Lightroom. Okay, now we need to do the red. Oh shit! I forgot to do the other lens. Channel can support like an actual employee.
Yes.
Like actually go out and shoot and do things, you know.
That would be lovely.
Make content. So here we are in Lightroom, and I looked at these just briefly, to kind of gather my thoughts of what I was going to talk about. And I really wanted this to be a deep conversation and a very detailed comparison of the pros and cons of these two lenses. And honestly, there's just not a whole lot to talk about, if I'm being totally honest. They are so similar that it's just insane. And Viltrox should be very, very proud. Now, that being said, Nikon should also be proud, because I'm not gonna drag this out. The Plena is better in some subtle ways, and then some not so subtle ways. So I don't want to take anything away from the Plena. It's definitely still the choice for some people, but I think probably 99% of people, the Viltrox 135 Lab is probably a pretty good offering to consider. One of the kind of glaring differences, obviously, is the communication that you get with third-party lenses. First-party lenses tend to just communicate better. And so we're going to take a look first at the continuous, human eye tracking. This is the Plena. It's right there. It's right on the eye. And whenever we look at the Viltrox, it's just kind of not really. It tends to hunt a little bit unless you're using the focus limiter, which I was not. Again, because I just like lenses to do their thing, right? But I do want to encourage you to subscribe so you don't miss the next video coming out, where I do a dedicated shoot with only the Viltrox 135 Lab. The first part of that, I'm using only single point autofocus, and then in the back half, I use continuous. And so we'll see how it really performs over the course of a shoot. But this is just one of the things that you can expect from pretty much any third-party lens. They're just never going to communicate as well as a first-party Nikon-made lens is going to. But we did the rest of these with single-point autofocus. Here we have the Plena, and let's get in at a unreasonable 200%. Very sharp, very detailed. The Lab, very sharp, very detailed. It seems like I actually focused on this eye instead, which is foolish, and that's my mistake. If you're really getting down and dirty, technically the Plena is sharper, but it is only noticeable in here at 200%. This is the Lab, slightly less sharp than the Plena is. Right there. And then also down here, this is the Plena. This is the Lab. And it is so slight that it is almost not worth mentioning. Now let's look at some of the differences in the tones that Allie was picking up on. She mentioned that the Lens 2, which was the Lab, was perhaps more warm. I think the tone of both lenses, if we look here, the tone is so incredibly similar. Yes, the Lab is a little more warm, perhaps, in most of the colors, but being a portrait lens, if we're looking at skin tones, it does emphasize the oranges a little bit, and I think that's because the reds do tend to shift towards a little bit of that orange anyway, and the Plena is just better balanced. It is more flattering on the skin tones, I think, because the saturation of all the colors is just more balanced. But as far as contrast goes, I feel like the contrast, they both have excellent contrast, but jumping back and forth quickly between the two, Plena, Lab, Plena, Lab, Plena, Lab, we can see that the Lab does give a little more orange, but this is pretty easy to work with, right? Especially for the price difference. We can go to our, we can probably just cool it down a little bit if we take our temperature. I mean, that's so close, it's unreal. Yeah, we got that pretty close. There's a slight difference in the shadows too. Yeah, we fixed that with just a little bit of temperature, but you could certainly adjust the oranges too. You could just desaturate just barely, or work with the hue a little bit. Just move the oranges slightly towards red, or maybe slightly towards yellow. Yeah, it took absolutely nothing to make them nearly identical tone-wise. Now let's take a look at the bokeh. You know, the Plena is known for having perfectly circular bokeh out to the edges. And yeah, that's totally true. I mean, you have It is perfect circles out here in this corner. And the lab, we do get a little lemon shape here, a little cat's eye, but it's not bad at all. You certainly wouldn't care unless you were looking at both of them side by side. You know what I mean? Lab also just has a little bit of vignetting, and you know the Plena corrects for that because it's supposed to be like perfect at the corners. The vignetting isn't terrible. It's more apparent on these images. This is the Plena, and that's the lab. Plena, lab. Let's look at the red door real quick. Plena, lab. If we look just down here, Plena, lab. But something that the lab definitely does better than the Plena is actually distortion. So if we go down to our lens corrections, this is the Plena. Let's look at the enable profile correction. Now if we look at the lab, much less distortion. I mean, a lot less distortion. Now, I don't really care about distortion. I have a hard time seeing distortion except on really wide lenses. And I always feel like that once I correct it, I actually don't like it as much. And so I just leave it alone. Like, I think this looks better than this. So it shouldn't be a reason that you don't buy the Plena and that you do buy the Viltrox. But it's just an observation that, you know, there are things that the lab is doing technically better than the Plena. And so great job, Viltrox. You can see the distortion better on this. This is the Plena. This is the lab. I mean, it's just, it's so well corrected for. See if there's anything else that we can notice in this image here. This is the Plena, lab. Look at the pores here for sharpness. I mean, they're just so similar in sharpness. Like, I can't believe how well Viltrox did on this lens for so little money compared to the Plena. Looking at these real quick for the saturation, the blue saturation is actually incredibly similar. But that isn't necessarily the case. Yeah, that's the Plena. That's the lab. The Plena is probably like sharper out to the edges than the lab as well. That's a small observation. I'm just kind of looking down here. Okay, I want to see if you guys can see the difference in the saturation of the reds. So this is the Plena. This is the lab. This is the Plena. This is the lab. And so you guys weren't there to like see it with your own eyes. And so this is kind of a goofy comparison, I suppose. But this is basically exactly what this door looks like. The Plena is giving us the red that the door is. And this is just slightly not so much. It's really subtle is the point that I'm making, but it does make a difference like in the skin tones. Going back to this one, if we get in here, that is the lab, Plena, lab, Plena, lab. If we look right here, it is so subtle and it pretty much doesn't matter. On the lab, right here, is just a little bit more orangey. Plena, lab. And it's so subtle, but, you know, Ali was able to pick up on some differences between lens 1 and lens 2. And see, this is the Plena. If we're looking down here, Plena, lab, Plena, lab. There's just slight tonal differences. I want to try to fix this, actually. We were kind of able to balance it a little bit with, like, the tiniest adjustments. It would take forever to sit here and gawk over it and fine-tune it. But the point is, there are differences that technically make the Plena better, but they're so small. Very, very interesting. I wanted there to be way more differences so I could really dive in and make like a huge recommendation, but this thing has got to be the reason why I'm seeing Plenas up for sale everywhere. Well, there you have it. So if you want to see what happens next, which is a full shoot with the Viltrox 135 Lab, you'll have to subscribe. That's coming up really soon. I'm Z Wade, the Z Wade, and Z Wade Photo. Stay sharp, YouTube.